Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Impacted Family and Friends Wellness Workshop Series. What we're going to be doing today is I call these icebreakers because this is not part of a very structured, we're doing 5 sessions in a row, taking a break, 5 sessions in a row. We're just trying to introduce you out there, all of you out there, to what this would feel like, because we get a lot of questions. Well, what are the workshops like? Well, we're going to show you today. My name is Anne Marie Matulis. I am I wear way too many hats, but the couple that I have on right now is I am the co-founder of a national movement for impacted family and friends called A Voice at the Table. And you can find us at avoiceatthetable.org. I am also the division director for the American Association of Suicidology's Impacted Family and Friends Division. Oh, and Jackie's here from Southwest Missouri. She's in our chat. Jackie Christmas from Missouri was supposed to be on the roundtable with us, but she was having connection and buffering problems. So she's on YouTube, and we'll keep talking to her in the chat, and that will work. So, Cheryl, you want to give yourself an introduction here?
You bet. Hi, everybody. My name is Cheryl Milkoch. I'm a licensed professional counselor here in Colorado, about 16 years now, specializing in trauma, complicated grief and loss, and especially suicide prevention. I'm also the Colorado coordinator for the Impacted Family and Friends Division, thanks to Anne Marie, excuse me. I like to call you Marie sometimes. You have 2 personalities, you know.
I'm a Gemini.
So, I know. Like my kids, I have 2. I know. So anyway, that's pretty much what I do. But I have a ton that I do on the side, mainly with AAS and a couple other areas. Just it's always suicide prevention all day long, right?
Yep, it is. Rosie, welcome aboard.
Hi, everyone. Rosie Wallace, currently in Las Vegas. Been traveling a little bit. I am a suicide loss survivor, having lost my only child a little over 15 years ago. Adam was 19. And the 15 years has been a long road. I have tried many different things to help me along. Anne Marie and I go back about 10
2008,
years now.
2009.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I guess that works for me. I am also currently a facilitator with the Compassionate Friends for Bereaved Parents. Here in Las Vegas, that's a big job, and quite frankly, it overcomes me every once in a while, but I step back to my best practices over the last 15 years, which pulls me through, and I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you both. And as for those who maybe didn't hear what I said, in our chat line, and Tracy Oser is out there. So in our chat and watching on YouTube, we have 2 more of our Impacted Family and Friends state coordinators. We have Jackie Christmas out there, who's having buffering problems. Jackie is the coordinator of Missouri. And we also have a couple of satellite programs already established in Missouri. Rosie, is someone working in the kitchen?
Yes.
Okay, maybe we need to mute you when you're not chatting.
I'm moving into another room.
Okay, go.
Okay.
All right, take your time. And so Jackie's been part of Impacted Family and Friends since 2018. You gotta unplug it, Rosie.
Gotta love live.
Yep, I love it. And so she's going to be. She has already been coordinating some of our workshops. And those workshops are one of the ones that we're doing now, which is the Re-Energize and Reconnect. This workshop was originally designed myself and Tracy Medeiros, who you're all saying, where is Tracy? Tracy's getting some rest. We overwhelmed her, and I take responsibility for that. It's finals week for her semester. She's been working on these projects. You've seen her on Facebook Live several times over the last few days, and working full time, and then continuing to do other homework for our projects. So she came in the door looking like death warmed over, and I said, bed, bed. And so you'll get to see her smiling and funny face next week. No, her face isn't funny. She's funny. I didn't say that.
Her face is a little funny.
I didn't mean it quite like that.
In a good
Also,
way.
also out in the audience is Tracy Osar. Now, Tracy is our Impacted Family and Friends Coordinator for Washington State. So we now have state coordinators in Massachusetts, Maryland, Missouri, Colorado, Washington State, New York State, Florida, and then Judy and Nina down in Florida are also this summer going to bring some of this work to Puerto Rico, and we are working on getting our materials translated in Spanish. So we're really and Joseph, you are with us.
Hey, Joseph.
So also online is Joseph Marks. Joseph is our new Impacted Family and Friends young adult coordinator. And he is going to gather a crew together. And this workshop that we do, and he and I and others did it on Saturday. And we knew we had run into a problem when he didn't know who the Eagles were. Sigh, big sigh. So his challenge was to go find me a more current music group that has either written songs about, spoken word about, or singing about forgiveness, because that was the key. Rosie, did we lose you? There we are. You're back. You're back. Okay. All right. Now, I just want to reaffirm that person who really should be was scheduled to coordinate this is Tracy Medeiros. She is the co-writer of these workshops. I would love to tell you she did it with great joy and enthusiasm. She did it kicking and screaming and dragging her feet because that was her style then at the time. But she needed to get some much needed soul care comes first. Health comes first before anything else. And she needed to get some extra rest so she could finish her finals. So with all of that said, we are going to run through an exercise and you are all going to participate out there. Hi, Heather. Oh, Southwest Missouri. Oh, Jackie's stacking the deck. We got to watch out for this.
Anne Marie, I totally forgot, by the way, because my self-care wasn't good last night. I apologize, everybody. I was up late because of that MTV documentary thing.
Awesome.
But I'm also a suicide attempt survivor, loss survivor, and an impacted family member. I apologize, just in case everybody else put it that label. I did not get much sleep, so I apologize.
No, I bet you did. The show was awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play Tracy. I can't do that well, but because I'm the no fun lady and she is the person who brings levity. But this is what would happen if we were all sitting around a table, okay? Mm-hmm. And so one of the most important things, and again, I want to stress that if you're in Colorado, or within that vicinity, Cheryl is going to be coordinating these, and then we're going to be training more people to be able to facilitate these. If you're in Washington, Tracy Oser is going to be doing this, and if you're in Missouri, Jackie and her satellite programs have already been doing these, so that they'll be just revitalizing it and bringing it back out. And Heather does rap. Yeah, we all do rap. Everybody. Rosie, have you ever done rap? Okay, hold that thought. No, oh, right. By the way, the fun thing you don't know about Rosie is she is an incredible dancer. And I mean chorus line tap dancer type thing.
Ooh.
Yeah, ooh, you should see some of her outfits. Anyway, are you all ready out there? I hope you've got a notebook and a pen and paper. There is a quiz later.
Ready to go.
You think I'm joking, right?
No, we know you.
I'm the no fun lady. Remember that, everybody. All right. So what's important is that you keep in mind that everything we do with these workshops in particular, and we have like 15 of them, 15 different workshops. We just added 5 more, so I guess that makes me mean we have 20. Please keep in mind that everything we do is related to suicide prevention and emotional, mental, and spiritual healing. And it's really important to keep that in mind. And please note, this is not counseling. These are not clinically supervised therapy. And they're not appropriate, actually, someone who's in immediate crisis for after a suicide attempt, or for someone who has just recently lost someone to suicide. Those you can come back to you can come back up with us after you've spent a little more time working through both of those processes. We have goals that are very standard throughout our workshops, and that I am particularly a firm believer. I think so many people set their goals so high, but we must be reasonable, realistic, and attainable. Goals have to be reasonable, realistic, and attainable, and that includes doing this workshop. And our goals right now, we also want to make sure that we are providing a safe haven and a safe environment to encourage and empower participants to share their healing journey with us. And some people prefer recovery and healing, or recovery. There's no right or wrong here. I really want to make that clear. This is about as wide open and flexible as you're ever going to see a workshop process. We also want to make sure we are preserving dignity, everyone's dignity, and we're countering stigma, shame, and discrimination. And our ultimate goal is to inspire hope to come back and be here tomorrow. Inspire hope that even in the darkness right now, there really is a light. And one of the things, I'm a New Englander, I'm a Massachusetts girl. I'm a Boston girl originally. And so I have the luxury of growing up with names like Thoreau and Emerson, and hanging out at Walden Pond, literally hanging out at Walden Pond. But this is an important criteria that prefaces everything we do with Impacted Family Workshops, and that is what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. And Emerson wrote that, and he was an extremely wise man. I think history's proven that, but just to say, sorry. Now, this says in New England. Well, right now, I think it's the entire country. We are familiar with preparation checklists, particularly whenever we're bracing for a winter storm. Yep. All right. So that goes, let's see, from the Mexican border all the way up here into northern New England, right? I don't think there's anybody who missed on this one. And so we look for our blizzards and nor'easters and our hurricanes, and those who live in other parts of the country, like Jackie in Missouri, have the alert warnings for tornadoes. And so those who hope to keep us safe do their best to forewarn us as early as possible to avoid disasters. So the checklist concept that we use throughout all of our exercises is a well-used tool. Do I have what I need? How well am I doing? Is there something more I need to do? And that is never in a beat yourself up attitude. That's just in a quick little checklist that we're doing. All right. Now, you don't all have the full workbook, but I want to read this anyway because I'm sure some of you out there will identify with it. Earlier in the workbook, in a different exercise, we do make a mention of Al-Anon's Blueprint for Progress. Now, if you want to take an inventory of yourself, not anyone else, do get yourself a copy. You don't have to have anything to do with a recovering alcoholic or have anything to do with that. That is probably the most intense, powerful self-inventory document I ever laid eyes on. And so they even have this, they have a whole chapter on anger. It's their own little chapter on anger. And they have 132 questions for you to answer about, so how well are you doing with this? It is, yeah, Cheryl, it's intense. It really is. I picked it up once and I was like thumbing through and I went, you've got to be kidding me, right?
Wow.
So, and hopefully if you're participating in this workshop out there or with us, there are 3 R's to anger: revenge, retaliation, and resentment. And hopefully you've kind of worked on the first 2. I hope, anyway, that you've worked on the first 2. Unfortunately, the deadliest of the 3 is resentment. That reliving and refeeling and turning things over and over. And we also call it the scorecard, actually. I have a good friend who calls it a hit list. And And that should wrap it up. And you say, well, what does that have to do with suicide prevention? What does that have to do with suicide loss survivors, attempt survivors, and impacted family? Oh, let me count the ways.
Mhm.
And we will go through some of that as we're going. But let me give you an example if you're still not quite sure. So I don't drive anymore. I have a rather severe visual impairment, so nobody would want me behind the car on the highway. But say someone's driving recklessly, which could happen, especially in these storms, right? And you feel threatened, and that is what happens behind the wheel of a car. Someone cuts us off, someone is driving radically and irrationally, and then we get all concerned about it. And the national instinct, if we feel threatened, that's fear, and with fear, we get angry. Anger is typically fear dressed up like something else anyway. And we could probably yell and scream and holler and maybe some very impolite gestures of our hands or single digits of our hands. Um, and then we go and tell at least 100 people about it, right? That idiot that was, almost cut me off. And so we perpetuate it. We fan the flames and we talk about it. And that's reliving the situation. And on the scorecard, and I have a beloved person in my life, and honest to God, she keeps score. Well, I sent them a birthday card and they didn't send one back to me. Well, I called twice and they haven't called me back. Now, that might sound adolescent, but it can be very adult behavior too, particularly where a little off kilter in our emotional balance. And so that's what these workshops are about. Um, and so we're going to move on. You got those pens ready? This is the fun part. At least I think it's fun. So we're going to take a quick wellness check, self-inventory. Everybody out there, including my roundtable here. So how are you doing these days with resentments? Do you still have a scorecard? Now, we're going to step back. We're all going to put our microphones on mute up here. And we're going to take only 4 to 5 minutes. Just right off the top of your head, do you still have a scorecard? Do you even remotely think you might have a resentment or two lingering out there? And for you, all of you on the chat, so here's your time too. And for those who are willing, you can write your notes right into the chat. You don't even have to put it down on paper. You can just put it up there where we can all see it. Or not. It's your call. All right. Ready to go? Go. 5 minutes. Okay, about 30 seconds more. Okay, Jackie, as I start there you go. All right, thank you. I was just about to say, or will we hear from you? So I'll just read it out loud um, for everybody to hear. So Jackie Christmas said, when I'm not feeling mentally well, the old resentments rear their heads. Oh, I identify with that. I must practice self-care, including purpose and gratitude to stay well. I'm at the point in life that I strive to reach my full potential, and the R's can be very quickly sabotage my growth and healing. Wow. Wow, I like that. I think I want to capture it. We need to capture that quote, everybody. Put it in the new workbook that we're working on. So with that said, Rosie, you want to jump in? I can't hear you.
There we are.
There you are.
Yes. Yeah, that was quite a powerful statement there, Jackie. Having lost my only child, I'm constantly seeing things thrown in my path that belong in my old resentment bag, if you would. Uh, Birth of children, weddings, just anything to do with the child's growth. And I missed a lot of it, and I was angry at first, and it turned into a lot of resentment. I was probably evil for a while during that period until I learned. And I keep learning because it happens all the time to me, and I'm sure everyone else. You just got to find what I do is I have a go to. And whether it's to get down on the yoga mat, put on my tap shoes, go out for a walk, I got to change it up immediately in order to change my thinking immediately and get back in a good place. Because it can, once that gets into your brain, if you're sitting on the couch and just nurturing it by thinking about it, it's going to take over again, and it's going to throw you back.
Thank you. Cheryl.
Well, I definitely second what both of you just said. Jackie, I think a lot of what I wrote was very close to what you had said. But as far as something in particular, I think, I've been on this journey for a long time now about sharing my story and all of that. But I still struggle with fear and resentment because we really aren't where we need to be when it comes to actually sharing what we've gone through. As we well know, we're in a place now of sharing more of the pain. Usually it's just about the hope. Everybody wants to know about the hope, which I get that. But if we don't really connect on the pain, then how can we really feel hope? And I have gone through an abnormal amount of traumas, over 20 or whatever. And I can never really fully share my story. I still feel like I can't. And I'm on platforms again to fully share, but I don't think anyone's really ready to hear it. I'll be honest, because they'll think, well, how could you have gone through that? And when you're a licensed counselor for 16 years, you definitely feel this obligation to, follow the yellow brick road or whatever and do it the right way. I don't know. And now my son's out there on this documentary. My whole family is, so it's kind of out there now. So I'm kind of glad it happened. Maybe it'll help change the way we are sharing, because I think the pain matters.
I can't agree with you more. And just to let everybody know, typically when we have a larger round table of 10, 15 people, one of the cautions that we do put out as part of the ground rules is that we don't critique or comment on what other people say. Everybody's in their own space and time of healing and recovery, and it's important to respect that. But I want to bring up the film from last night, Cheryl. So for those of you who didn't see it, now, Cheryl, how is that available to people now? Is that on demand, or do you know?
Yeah, it's on mtv.com right now for the rest of the month, or I'm sorry, till May, I think, for free.
Till May for free.
Yeah. And I can always put up a link later if you need that. But I just found that out last night, so I'm learning as we go along.
And the title again, each day?
Each and every day.
Each and every day. So
Mhm.
what we're talking about, Cheryl and I and Jackie and Tracy Oser, who's been with us, and Rosie has done compassionate friends. Everybody's done some form, been the facilitator for some form of training or education. And I can tell you that for years, when I have been out in communities in particular, is that I kept saying it all last night. I kept saying, I wish I had this film 5 years ago. I wish I had that film 2 years ago. And on and on and on and on. And I kept saying it because it is brutally honest. Now, when I don't mean that in a negative sense at all. These kids just, woo, they blew the door open. They had more courage than most adults I know who are in the field of suicidology to say, this is how I really feel. And there was no sensationalism.
No.
There was no look at me, look at me. If anything, there was an almost unwritten humility in each and every one of them saying, I don't know how I started feeling this way. But I did. And it was real. And each one of them, the way they were able to articulate their feelings just was incredible. I cannot recommend this film more highly for parents to sit down and watch. I mean, up to this point, about the best product we've had to help kids in particular. And this ties right into this exercise, because if people come into this exercise and they are still tangled up in fear and anger, the 3 R's of anger, if whatever age you're at, if you're tied up in that, it's deadly. And the kids reflected that last night and what they were talking about, what brought them to that edge. And it wasn't like necessarily anything so heavy duty. It was that compilation of things that happened. But I can't say enough, because the only tool I've had to use before this, and I've used it wisely and well, is good, Emery, right out of your brain it went. It's the AFSP film of for teen depression. And but it's I don't want to criticize it because it's been of great value, but I would use this film. I recommend this film for everybody to hear the real stories. And I include that to loss survivors. I think I am a firm believer. I mean, that's how we started the Impacted Family movement, was for loss survivors and attempt survivors to come to the same table, share their stories, and recognize they can learn so much from each other. And that can, in fact, improve. Removing the resentment, removing the anger, removing the blame. And so I cannot say enough about it. I wish I had had a whole world to shout out last night, Cheryl, and I mean that. And each story in itself was a gem, but when you weave them all together, it was an incredible tapestry, because they come away saying, my life is not perfect now, still, but I'm here.
Yeah, and I think the big thing that intertwined them all, though, honestly, was it's always about secrets. And I remember my son said, Mom, you've been sharing your story for a long time. If I'm going to go and let the whole world hear me share, can I really, truly talk about the pain? And I was like, you can. I'm sure they're going to cut out some of it, which they did, but that's normal when there's 9 kids talking.
Yeah.
But they still got a good, idea of the pain and where it came from and the depth of it. And he said, well, okay, then I'll do it. And Mabry was one of my previous youth leaders, and she's on there as well. And she said the same thing. She goes, am I going to get cut down the way we have when we've talked out here in the county? And I said, no, you give them what you got, and they'll respond and let us know. But MTV said, nope, we're ready to do it all the way. We're tired of it too. And let's make it happen. Because a lot of these kids are resilient. I'm resilient, but the pain tends to return when you can't be authentic.
Yep. Yep, and absolutely, and not for today, but we'll bring it up again soon, is that back in November, we hosted with Spark Media, we hosted a town hall meeting, and we had Hallie Toomey on, and we had her on again just a few weeks ago, and that's from the film Scattering CJ. She is CJ's mom, and a few weeks back when we had it was what was it? It was safe messaging, effective storytelling, and methodology. It's complicated. It's very complicated. And she took off all the band-aids. She ripped them right off and said, no, this is how I really feel as a loss survivor. And I think the pain and the rawness and the honesty, the courage to be honest about it probably stunned a lot of people. And I was so forever grateful because I'm a facilitator for grief, for suicide prevention. I am a loss survivor. And I reached out to a lot of the people I've worked with and apologized for not asking the right questions, for not asking, not to say, do you want to talk about something else other than being the good survivor? You know, can we talk about more? And so now, if we digress from our workshop, welcome to our world. Because the point of this is to be real. It's to make the connections and hopefully give someone else hope. But we're going to move on right now. And I want to read a quote from one of my favorite writers. And this is in the workshop, by the way, for the people who don't have the actual exercise. So you just have to get rid of so much baggage to be light enough to dance. Oh, there you go, Rosie. To be light enough to dance, to sing, to play. You don't have time to carry grudges. You don't have time to cling to the need to be right. Ooh, ouch. Woo. So in our just in reflection, and we're not going to stop and really work on these, but the next process of this exercise would be how did you achieve freedom from anger? And how did you achieve freedom from fear? So let's just hold on to those because it's already 4:35. And we wanted to give you a sample of all of this. So we mentioned the 3 R's. So in these exercises, we have 3 R's, 3 S's, and 3 F's. That's not one of them. You hear that one a lot, but we don't actually write it into the workshop. So let's talk about this 3S. And this is big. This is huge. Actually, this is where I know that Tracy would have been shining because her whole semester has been on stigma and wellness, on the social sciences, natural sciences, history, all through that, and the history of stigma and shame and how that was all brought up and how that impacts her as a suicide attempt survivor. So she's been doing a lot of work on that. So let's talk about stigma. All right, the 3 S's, by the way, are suicide, stigma, and shame. And the question for you to put your pen to paper for on this one for 5 minutes is, do prejudice and discrimination around being a suicide attempt or a loss survivor or impacted family still play a major role in your life? If they don't, why not anymore? And if they do, are you willing to share a couple of anecdotal experiences? So we're all going to shut down for 5 minutes. Pens to paper, everybody. Okay, about 30 seconds or so to wrap up. Okay, so let's take a look at Jackie's remarks first. I have been able to not allow the stigma and shame to influence my work around prevention. My daily work is with special circumstance deaths, especially those are preventable and foreseeable. Um, Fascinating. Cheryl, would you like to read Heather's? Heather, you put it in there, so I'm guessing it's okay for us to share it with others?
You want me to read it?
Yeah, please.
So I assume, yeah, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Heather says, not being enough. It is always rolling around the back of my head. Shame at not being enough, not being able to deal. Fear of allowing it all out because of stigma and shame, not wanting to be thought of as that person. Lots of stigma.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah. Rosie, I'm back to you.
Okay. The shame was a huge thing for me years ago. And it happened, it was thrown on me because shortly after Adam passed, a lot of people deserted me, just left. And I'm sure we've all had that experience, but mine continued. It continues on to this day. 15 years later, I'm still trying to improve relationships with especially with my family. And I always thought it was because they were ashamed of me, ashamed that my son died by suicide, and it just took me leaving my family, actually divorcing them, to start working on myself and saying, I am not ashamed that I am Adam's
Mm.
mother. I'm not ashamed that he died by suicide. I am, I'm many other different things, but I wasn't ashamed. Uh, and it's something we have to face almost every day again. And this is where I always pull up from the bootstraps and just say, okay, it's a new day. I'm going to meet new people out there. They're going to pass judgment on me. They may walk away from me or whatever. And I just have to shore up and be prepared for all of that. And so I'm very open when I meet new people about the fact that I in work in suicide prevention, because I just don't want other people to feel this way. And that's when they start to soften a little bit, and I can talk to them. One other thing I want to mention is with the stigma, and particularly the old phrase, committed suicide. Um, Again, every day. My husband was playing racquetball with a former police officer. And here in Las Vegas, they just published that we've had 19 student suicides recently since with the pandemic. And he says, I can't believe all these kids are committing suicide. And my husband just touched his elbows and said, I'd like to talk to you a moment. He went, that former policeman went back and wrote an email to his former superiors and the people he works with to say, we have to stop using committed suicide. So every day,
Yep.
do what we can.
Yep. 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 We can't take on the tidal wave, but we can take along the ripple.
One at a time.
Yep. Cheryl, we're back to you.
Okay, well, I think you said that really nicely there. I'm really just like all of you, I truly just focus on what we can do. We're all extremely painfully aware of the broken systems. I mean, I've been working in it for a very long time, and I'm not that kind of therapist. I'm quite the opposite and do a holistic approach. And I'm grateful for how far we've come. And I just try to create a stage, like with what you're doing, Anne Marie, and being a part of this, so other people can share, and I help guide them. Which is so funny, though. Mabry called me last night, the one that was on the documentary, and she goes, Cheryl, can I say something to you? And I said, yeah. And she goes, you have been pushing us and helping us all of this time, and you help so many other people to share, but you still haven't fully shared. And I went, I know. I'm trying to figure out how to tell it all. And she goes, well, it's time. Take the risk. And I said, yes, ma'am.
Yep.
And so that's what I'm going to do at the conference this year. I'm going to take a risk and share a lot more. And I'm just going to figure out how to do that. But yeah, I'm done hiding, and I help everyone else push through. And I think I've been hiding behind them and only telling parts. But it's out there now. And I think that's what we need to do, is just focus on being a part of this healthier system. That's why we're here. And what a beautiful place for us to be in.
Yeah, it is. And good for her, by the way. And good for you. I think it's past time. And I think I think we have most of it on film. We're going to be compiling all of our live streams and different things that we've done over the last few months. And we're going to be compiling them and putting them all up on a Voice at the Table. And for those of you out there listening and not involved yet in the chat, or even those on the chat, I think you're going to be very surprised. It's a very different. It's it's beyond just ripping the scab off. I mean, we just kicked the doors open in talking about things that and we were told going into a couple of these town halls, you can't talk about that. And I said, look, I'm a Dorchester girl from Boston. You do not tell me I can't. I'm going to walk right over that grass the minute you tell me I can't walk on that grass. So that's not the way to approach this by any stretch of the imagination. I could be in a minority. I sincerely believe we have tiptoed on the eggshells way too long. I think that has been detrimental for people seeking help. I think it's been detrimental for people being willing to speak up. And so let's move forward and throw it all off and say, this is the reality that we are. Now, I didn't share about my stigma. I did not experience any stigma with my suicide loss. My suicide loss was only 2 years ago. I have to backtrack. My first involvement with a suicide death. Do I have to say that many years? I was 22, long time ago, and our next door neighbor died by suicide, and his little daughter came running over. She was all upset. She had just had an argument with him. He had been drinking excessively, and he killed himself. And it took me years into my work with suicide prevention before I even ever connected that as being, no, you have been touched by suicide. But with my late husband's suicide 2.5 years ago, he was my abuser. That's a whole different story. And in addition to that, there had been no contact for 37 years or 36 years at that time. So there was no emotional upheaval. So I always identify myself very cautiously with that. But what I will share with you, and it's how the movement got started, was way back 38 years ago now. I got free from that violence as a battered woman. And I mean a broken body. Not only my mind was broken, but as they noted in the x-rays when they started to do the work, yeah, there weren't too many bones in my body that hadn't been broken. And that is why I have a visual impairment today, because of untreated skull fractures. But I also stepped out away from that violence and terror at a time in 1982 and 1983 and 84 when it was blame the victim. What did you do to cause it? What's wrong with you? Um, and it took some years, and that's how I became an activist. I was so angry. Talk about anger. I was in a white rage, and I was the only one who didn't know it. This is what I sounded like in my stiletto heels. That was my walk across the room, right? On fast forward, stiletto heels, until someone mentioned it. He said, "Do you realize you're wearing two very dangerous weapons?" And I thought, well, I like you too, and I thank God for the Vietnam veterans who wrapped around me and said, honey, you better sit down here because no one else is going to want to sit next to you for a while. And they were right. They were right. I was not cool to be around. I was in a rage, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I didn't know how to identify it. But what I did know was the looks I got. What I did know was, what did you do to cause that? He's such a nice guy. And I lived with that emotional and psychological stigma for a long time, and every once in a while it can still come up. So, Heather out there, I can't begin to tell you, it took a good 3 to 5 years before I stopped worrying about being not good enough. I stopped. I pushed it aside. Because there were no resources, there was no help. That has a familiar ring to those of us who are involved in impacted family. And when I started to write the workbook, wondering how do I help impacted family members understand that I do know that fear, I had to do it from the perspective of domestic violence. And there is such a thread woven between domestic violence and suicidality, suicidal thinking. But that stigma, unfortunately, I'd love to tell you that all these years later, that's not happening anymore. That is still too alive and destructive within the field. So I am so grateful, Rosie, that delightful husband of yours whispered in his ear and said, can we talk for a minute, over here? Because I think that is our hope. I'd love to tell you that political will and major money would do it. It won't. This is a learned behavior. We are not born with this prejudice and discrimination and stigmatizing people. That is taught, unfortunately, mostly in the home. So, on that happy note, everybody, taking a deep breath. Now, those of you out there, now you know how deep of a dive it can turn into as we go. And that's why if we were around the table, we would have taken a whole bunch of breaks in between, by the way. We would have forced you to get up and move around and move through that. It is almost 5:00. And but I would like to touch, if everybody's still game, I would like to touch on probably what my honest evaluation is the single most difficult exercise that we do. And it brings us to the F word. Yeah, that one too. And the quote that I thought was so funny, Joseph was on campus when he checked in earlier, and he's been driving home because what happened is that we read this quote the other day, and it turned out that he didn't know who the Eagles were. Can you imagine someone not knowing who Don Henley is? Yeah, Rosie. I mean, he said, "Who are the Eagles?" And I went, "What?" Because for everybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, on the sheet that we have, the worksheet, it says, Don Henley, co-founder of the Eagles, wrote, "It's about forgiveness. So let's talk about forgiveness." And I can tell you, at one point I looked it up on Amazon. It was several thousands upon thousands upon thousands of titles that had the word forgiveness in them that were out there. And he was writing that song about a very important forgiveness, and that is that the Eagles, for those who don't know, one of the best bands around, they broke up. They broke up because they ended up in risky behavior, and they had a whole lot of personal troubles, and they couldn't get along with each other anymore for a while. That's why it was no irony that their comeback album was Hell Freezes Over. There was no nuance in that whatsoever. So let's talk about this a little bit, because I'll say it up front, fully transparent. Had I not been willing to embrace this word and all that it means, I would not be standing here. I would not be standing here. It has been the key to my life. And I know some people find that hard to understand, but with all that happened, but it is the reality. So now, who might you have on your forgiveness list? We're going to give you some tips and some help here, okay? You, how's that for a good start? Self-forgiveness. You might think forgiving others is the most important. No, it's not. That's the toughest one. Forgiving the loved one you lost to suicide, not because of their death. It's never intended to be that. But at the whole situation of suicide, about suicide itself, not the individual. Clinicians, nothing personal, Cheryl. Clinicians for not listening or hearing you. That would never be Cheryl, by the way. Doctors, same as above, not listening or hearing you. Hospitals, same as above. Everybody loves those emergency room divisions. ER personnel, same as above, although I think I need to give some kind of a slight, definite, positive note, because of what I've heard from suicide attempt survivors of all ages, is that the nurses are typically the more compassionate than anyone else. The minute you go, I know Tracy has shared it in her story over and over and over again, that the minute they identified what she was there for, they left her alone. They walked away, literally. And it would be the nurse who would come back and say, "You okay, hun?" So we have a lot of work to do. By the way, our New York state coordinator is Dr. Kathleen Carter Martinez, and Dr. Casey, and her specialty is trauma. Her professional specialty is also emergency departments. Mm-hmm. We're going to turn her loose on them in no time soon. Other family members and friends, the same as above, for dismissing the importance of the issue, the lack of support. And then I know some people put this at the top of the list. We put it down towards the end, because you got to work through your own self-forgiveness. God, Allah, whatever you call your spiritual entity. And if you don't have one, then it will come back to you, because those two are inseparable. Our connection with the world, with the earth, with the wind, it comes back to something, but it will always come back to me. So, what we would do with that, and this is different for everybody. There are people I know, I certainly, for a chunk of my life, I had a no never list, and my former husband was high on that. Actually, he was the only one on it. He was the only one on it. He was my abuser, and then I had some wonderful people walk me through how to release that. There was one other person on my no never list, and that was a family member who had assaulted me when I was a little girl. And I went through that forgiveness. I learned to forgive my father. My father did nothing. My father was awesome. Unfortunately, he died at the age of 50 of a massive coronary. I had just experienced my first beating, and I blamed him for not protecting me. Now, he can't protect something he didn't know about, and of course I hadn't told anybody about it. But I went the next 15 years with that resentment huge out there, until I finally made peace, and I went to his grave and set him free. Now, I'm not asking anybody to do what I've been doing, and I wouldn't impose that on you. That's not what we're talking about. But now I would like you to take, this is typically a very long writing piece of a workshop, by the way, because these workshops were originally done in an all-day retreat where you had quiet space you could even go to separately. Those in-person things we used to do, where you could go off, and we always held them in a place where you would have good indoor, outdoor quiet space to do some reflection and reading, and then come back in. But we are virtual. So we're only going to take about 5 minutes, and just never mind the list. Just let's just jot some things down about either what we've learned about forgiveness, we need to improve on with forgiveness. Maybe you have a no never list. Remember, we're not here to criticize, critique, or comment specifically, but let's take a few minutes to just do some reflecting and writing, okay? And we'll be back. Okay, about 30 seconds. So I'm going to look at Jackie's. We had 10 years of hospitalizations, treatment centers, quasi-military school, job corps, therapy, etc. It was easy to be mad at everyone at first, you know? The system failed my child. However, everyone did the best they could. I still wish I knew then what I know now, but I did my best too. Amen to that, Jackie. I think that's one of the important things is that we do the best we can with the information we have at hand. Um, that's always a big, 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 big challenge. Rosie?
Two comments, if I would.
Absolutely.
The first part about forgiveness for me was to realize that I did not have to sit down and have a heart to heart with someone telling them I forgive them. Okay?
Yeah.
It is a very private thing. It's between you and you.
Yeah.
So that was a big revelation in my life that I worked on, and I continue to work on it. One of my mantras when it comes to forgiveness, I keep on going back to is that I'm grateful for what I have and not for what I don't have. So I use that as a protection uh, when I'm in a position where I'm not getting what I need from somebody,
Mm-hmm.
like clinician or a family member or whatever. And I said, just be grateful for the time that I have right now with them. And if I can educate them in any part, I will. But the forgiveness of oneself, I got to tell you, um, I have forgiven myself many times over, probably once a week now. And I have to keep on remembering that it's okay. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just pull it back and continue on and do the best I can. Like Jackie said, she was doing the best she could. We probably all do the best we can in that particular situation and
Yeah.
just learn from it, carry it forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Rosie. Cheryl?
Yeah, exactly. And I've learned to forgive myself for what I'm about to share right now. As a teenager, I was a trauma survivor, and my mother was a lot like you, Anne Marie. And she had married the wrong man,
Mm-hmm.
and he murdered her in a very brutal, brutal way. And the bottom line is that, we had gone through so many traumas up to that point. I had sexual abusers and things like that up to that point. And after she was killed, I had a revenge plot. And I've always been the protector. I was that way in school. I was that way of my mother, even though I was very angry with her because she was an alcoholic. Um, and but I had to take care of her, so that was just in my nature. So bottom line, though, during this revenge plot is really when I had a spiritual experience, and I was pretty much told that this is exactly what he wants you to do, the one who killed her. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, what do you mean? He needs to be shut down. The system's broken. They're not even helping. There was no mental health help. There was nothing. And this was in the 80s, the late 80s. And honestly, I learned very quickly that none of that was going to change, but I was going to lose my freedom. And what he really wanted was control. It's always about control in these
Yeah.
situations. And I knew very quickly that I didn't want to lose control. I'd always worked on being in control, but at that moment, it just takes you over. But very quickly, I guess I had a spiritual intervention that said, well, why don't you do the one thing that you promised your mom you would do after she was killed? And I had completely forgotten that when I said goodbye to my mom, in the ICU. She was in a coma, but then, I had like a minute and a half to say goodbye. That's all they would allow me to do. And I remember telling her I forgived her for everything. And her blood pressure went up, the machines went off, she couldn't talk, and the doctors were like, oh my gosh, she hears you. And then I remember saying, Mom, you couldn't live, so I'm going to live for you. And that immediately lifted all of the pain. And then I have tried to stick to that ever since.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a director at the Department of Mental Health here in Massachusetts yesterday morning, who we're working on by the way, all my IFF people, we're working on a new project.
Really?
Really? Yeah, I know. You can't imagine that, right? Well, it's domestic violence and suicide prevention.
Yeah, I know. I'm so grateful that you're doing that.
And I said to her, I said, are you sure you want me to do this? And I said, do you remember the movie The Burning Bed?
Oh,
And she said, yes. I said, I can't tell you how many nights I sat outside planning something just like that.
yeah.
I said, and you have no idea how many millions upon millions of those still in the throes of domestic violence make that thought process almost real. I said, and when I started my healing process, they weren't worried about me in suicide. They had homicide stamped all over my folder. And I said, you know what saves most of us from taking any action? Because we have become so beaten down emotionally, psychologically, that we think we'll screw it up and the sucker might live.
Exactly. Exactly.
And she just sat there looking at me for a split second, and then we both cracked up, right? And she said, never thought of it that way. I said, oh, I have.
Oh yeah. We go all those directions.
And yes, and those are the things we need to talk about. People will go, because when I've shared that from a podium in front of thousands of people, you can hear the, did she just say that? I wait for a moment. I say, yeah, I did. I said, and I would love to see a show of hands right now of me too. I said, because I'm going to take 50% of you just because. And so one of the things this is why forgiveness is such a challenge, because there are those things that we don't share openly with everybody. I mean, that's not your typical, let's sit around and have a cup of coffee conversation.
Yeah.
Not unless you want that person never to come back again. But it is so important to say, because when we stand here and we are going to be impacted family coordinators across the country, we are going to be leading people in these conversations. And if we can't sit and be transparent, then we probably shouldn't be doing that. We've had too much cover up. We have had too much of someone with no science behind it telling us what to say or what we should say and what we can say. And that's not just attempt survivors, it's lost survivors. You have to tell your story a certain way. And when I got involved with suicidology, I followed along with that because I thought everybody knew what they were doing, until I figured out, I'm that, what is it they say about scientists? They want to know why and they want to know how. Why did it happen? How did it happen? And I'm that damn person that keeps saying, excuse me, can someone please explain to me why we're doing it this way?
Yeah.
And I may be getting old, but I haven't lost that. I don't think I'm ever going to be cured of it.
Me either.
So for all of you out there listening, be aware of who you're getting involved with.
Look out.
We're not the rabble rousers. We're the merry band of upstarts. There we go. The merry band of upstarts. So Cheryl and Rosie and Jackie, if you're still there, you are. And Jackie, thank you very much, Cheryl, for sharing that. We all have to. It has to be honest. It has to be honest. We have to. So let's think of last thoughts. Let's do an evaluation. What did you think about this? And now remember, this is not the 3 R's as we call it, that includes an S and an F, typically take 2 full sessions because there's only 4 of us at the table right now. Typically, you have 10 to 12 to 15 at the table. And to allow time for everybody, to go through that, then it's going to take up the full 2 hours. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that. But in this version, Rosie, I think this is the first time you've gone through this with us, right? Or did you do one with us last summer?
I did one last summer.
Okay. Was this the topic?
Part of it.
Part of it. Okay. All right. So your honest evaluation, how do you feel? Do you have some takeaways? Are you taking some things away for yourself to think about? So we're gonna just do an open debrief, everybody. And the same in the chat. If you're anyone left out there, how would you debrief this?
Am I on? Okay. In debriefing this is, as you said, this was a much shorter version of what we're going to be going through.
Yep.
And of course, the time that we give people to respond to the questions and to get back into a discussion of it is going to be a little bit longer. But the transparency is so important in any facilitating situation. We just have to remember that it is about everyone participating and not just us. And certainly give credence to everyone from that perspective. So notes, I got tons more notes.
I see them. I see them. I see them. Cheryl, you have so many perspectives. There are so many lenses that you could address this with.
Well, I think that's really the whole point. I am so relieved. This is the moment I've been waiting for. I don't really know how else to say it. I still want to cry every time I think about it. I can actually wear all these different experiences and I don't have to separate them in a talk or at the table. I'm allowed to actually blend them and then talk how they all are intertwined, because they are, when most people said, no. And I've always said, but that's not true. Pain is pain. And if you're a level 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, then I'm a 10, then guess what? We get each other. Your story might be different and I might relate, but can we stop all that kind of madness and just be here together? And very quickly, you do see they are all intertwined. And I know because I've lived it. So I'm just so grateful, Anne Marie.
Cool. Jackie said, I can hardly see it. Hold on.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, could you please? That's hard for me to see.
You bet. Jackie says, I love this exercise. Last time in my workshop, it went down the negative self-talk road. Yeah, that happens a lot. So we spent extra time on that. Each exercise stands alone, or we can be tweaked to meet the needs of the participants.
That's true. Yeah, and that's an important piece for anyone who even sees this recording afterwards, is that this is not a one size fits all. And by the way, if you did back to back to back workshops of this particular breakup and different facilitators, or even the same facilitator, it wouldn't be the same.
No.
Right.
And that's what is not allowed in a lot of I'm editing. That is not generally allowed in many of the resources that are given to loss survivors and attempt survivors. By the way, there are no other resources for impacted family. Is that you have to, I'll use Assist as a great example. That's a training I love. That's a training I did. That's a training I trained people in. But it is a by the book, and you will stick to that language. You will stick to that phrase. You will not digress off to the right or the left or anywhere else in between. And many suicide prevention trainings are geared for that, to maintain integrity. We believe with these workshops we're doing for impacted family and friends, whether it's the Finding Inner Peace for the impacted family or the Re-Energize and Reconnect for loss and attempt survivors, that the integrity is going to always be there because of the people who are facilitating. And I long ago, I remember when we were first putting these together in 2013, and this is a piece of history that people need to know too, is that by then, remember 2013, think of the time frame, it was a buy the book, da 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 da. And then I said, well, that's not going to work. And Tracy said, you're joking, right? You think everybody's going to follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? This is not assist. And she was right. That's why her input was so valuable. She said, Mom, you just got to talk to them. We got to make this a conversation. It's a workshop, but it's a conversational workshop. And so we will continue to allow it to I believe it will find its place. I do want to say these exercises and the entire workbook process that we have for Impacted Family have been vetted. They have been evaluated as evidence-based, and they have been vetted by the American Association of Suicidology. And so I just want you to know that there is that value behind it, but good God, no one's going to be micromanaging and looking over your shoulder. And with that, let's just say good night to everybody. Please stay safe, stay well. Next week's workshop, by the way, is not at 4:00. It is it 7 or 7:30? Anyway, we'll have Tracy out chatting to you real soon when she's well rested. And we'll get her up and running, and she will be here. Everybody heard me say this. Tracy will be facilitating next week. It will not be this exercise. We have done that, and we will go through it. So that, I can't thank you all for spending some time this afternoon with me. I always walk away with these. My takeaway is I always walk away, A, having learned something more about myself, and B, I just feel better. Even with the serious stuff, I just really feel better. And I hope you all did too.
Isn't that a great Me Too movement? I just feel better. Me too.
Yeah, me too. I mean, really, and it's like, and when's the next one? The next one is next Wednesday in the early evening. And we'll put out we'll have Tracy live stream and chatting to make sure we get her back up in front. All right. So we're going to say good night to everybody. Thank you for being with us. This recording, by the way, will be available for a couple of weeks. And then I will be taking it down. We'll be taking all of these down because come the first week in March, we start the real, not that this isn't fake. This is not fake news. But we will be starting a scheduled, so 5 in a row, 5 in a row, 5 running simultaneously, by the way, depending on what part of the country you're in. So, and that's going to run right through June. That schedule is going to be intense. The good news is that not everybody is expected to be at all workshops, except me. And that's okay too.
Those darn jobs.
I know. Yeah. Damn those jobs. All right. So my love to all. Be well, be happy, do something soul carry. None of this, don't dabble on this. Do something really light, frivolous. Maybe, no, it's too cold. I was just going to say maybe the best thing is to step outside. Okay, for those of you in the southwestern part of the country, probably not. Not a good idea. All right. All right,
dancing. Dancing all day long.
No dancing, right.
Always.
All right. Peace out.
Bye.